Alright, it's time to count down my favorite games of 2023, specifically games that I've played on this channel. But because I have played games that aren't exclusively from this year, and if I was counting my games that were exclusively from this year, I couldn't even make 5, I have decided to sort of also take in games that are older than 2023, and so, there are a couple of rules like that. So, because of that, I've decided to make the rule for one: if I played the game before I reviewed it on the channel, I will not, take it in the list. So, a game like Katana 0, despite it being amazing, I will not be at all talking about it in this list because I played it before I reviewed it on the channel, being that I played it years ago, right? However, a game like Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk that is way older than 2023, but still a game that I first discovered and played in 2023 is a game that I will be fully available to talk about. There's also going to be the one last thing, and that is I didn't play Baldur's Gate. I'm sorry, I am making a playthrough of it. I'm playing through it now, but I haven't played through it yet, and as such, I won't be mentioning it. I just thought I would get that out of the way since that might be a question later on. And other than that, this list is in no particular order. I haven't made it up so like it's the best at the top or whatever. These are just the favorite games that I can recommend to anybody who asked. And yeah, so let's just get right into it. To start off with, I want to talk about a little game called Sea of Stars. It's a game that I actually played fairly recently that I absolutely fell in love with. Sea of Stars is a game that takes on old role-playing games like the old Final Fantasy games is a really good example. Like with the turn-based combat, it's pixel art. It actually reminds me a lot of Octopath Traveler, which is another really good pixel art RPG in that vein. However, it renews it. It tries to add new mechanics to it, such as parrying and counter-attacking, and all of it is really fun. It's usually fairly simplistic, with most of the mechanics being press spacebar at the right time or time the spacebar attack, but it still manages to be really fun within that realm of simplicity. It's a little nice renovation that makes it, change quite a bit, because back in the old days of, these RPGs, I just press a button and watch the attack play out. Here I have to engage with it, and that's honestly sort of cool. And in addition to that, I do love the fact that in Sea of Stars, as I've talked about in the video I did make on Sea of Stars, the actual story and the world that is set in is just super interesting, having anywhere from cyberpunk stuff to fantasy stuff, dragons, literally down to eldritch horrors. Like you have the fucking enemies that you fight against, like the priests of the Fleshmancer. They are all like these worshipping the Fleshmancer, who essentially just transmute, well, I think it's people mostly, into these random beings that literally looks like an indescribable horror, and I absolutely adore it. It's also a game that is extremely cute in its presentation, both within how the characters are designed, the animations to them, but also how they interact with each other. There is a really, really touching moment in the game that I won't spoil that completely took over my playthrough once I saw it, and I absolutely adored it. It originally gave me a lot of vibes along the same lines of something like Lord of the Rings. Like you have these adventurers who are out on their quest to find the thing that they need to do. In Lord of the Rings, it's throw the ring into the volcano. At the beginning of the game, it's finding the Elder Mist. And I really, really enjoyed that. I think it's a really good game. It's a big indie game. I know a lot of people probably have heard about it, but for those of you who haven't, I think it's amazing. And I really do think it's worth, just giving a try, seeing what you think about it and playing it. If you want to, it's on Game Pass, if you have that service. Otherwise, you can buy it on Steam or really any other store, I'm pretty sure. Alright, so next up we have Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk, and Bag of Milk outside of a Bag of Milk outside of a Bag of Milk, which are two visual novel games that I played this year that I loved. Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk is the original, while Bag of Milk outside of a Bag of Milk outside of a Bag of Milk is the sequel. Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk inside of a Bag of Milk is about helping the main character, a girl that we don't have a name for, buy milk. Now, you see, that might sound like an easy task, but it's easier said than done. being that in bag of milk, inside of a bag of milk, inside of a bag of milk. I'm going to stop saying that now and just call it milk. But inside of that game, the girl suffers from mental illness, some of which being paranoia and what could very much so look like some social anxiety along with depression. And the game itself tackles the struggle that she deals with just going outside to buy a bag of milk. Let alone that it's a little bit weird to buy a bag of milk and not a box of milk, but like that's whatever it is. But in the game, you're essentially helping her with that. Now, in the journey throughout it, you see multiple strange monsters that are probably supposed to be people, but through her like own interpretation of what she's seen, they look like monsters. And that is sort of how the entire game is reviewed. One of the coolest parts is when you are in a general store and you see a guy and the main character just at some point stops comprehending what he is saying, and it just becomes a bunch of foes. And it's great. It's actually really good. That's also partially because of the writing, being that the writing is superb. The main character is fun, endearing, and really charming. I really do end up you end up really liking them throughout the game, and I think it's a very good description of mental illness actually in games as well. And the sequel just continues the plot of the first one. They're both enhanced by music, obviously, because they both have a banger soundtrack. Not in the this is a certified club banger that I'd listen to 24/7, but in the sense that they both have really good ambience. And it's actually something that I've been listening to for quite a while because I just really like, especially one of the songs in the first game. They're both, and like in that, I think they both succeed. The second one has full-on animations, and as such, also do cost a little bit more than the first one, but it doesn't change that it's worth playing. It's a universal recommend for me. Neither of them are from this year. But I did play them this year, and as such, I ended up really having to recommend them. That rule basically exists so I can talk about bag of milk inside of a bag of milk inside of a bag of milk, and bag of milk outside of a bag of milk outside of a bag of milk, which I've canonically named the Milk franchise. I absolutely adore the games. You can buy them both on Steam, and I think you should because they're both really good. Now, moving on to the next part of the list, it's Hunt the Night. Hunt the Night is what would happen if The Legend of Zelda, like the old top-down games, and Bloodborne went out for a good night and subsequently came home together. This game is fantastic. I love it. It very easily puts you into the role of the main character, Vesper, as she has to traverse what is essentially a pixelated Lovecraftian world, killing horrors that are only befit of a game like Bloodborne. It also does still a lot of the Souls mechanics, which you had like bonfires and everything like that, and it is really good. It is insanely difficult. Most of the encounters I only came out with one health left or a half a heart. It is really hard. But it's also a game where you can sit at half a heart for forever, as the game requires the use of iframes. And once you understand how to use it, and once you've gotten good at using iframes, you can dodge through quite a few attacks. I remember my final boss fight in the game. I was sitting there on my last half a heart for about half of the fight. It is fantastic. In very uncertain terms, it's a game that not only interested me simply because of the idea of these night creatures coming out and essentially sort of taking over the world, putting all sort of Lovecraftian horrors everywhere. You played as Vesper, a hunter to hunt these monsters down. Not only did that interest me, but also just the way the game looks, as it looks exactly like I described. A combination of Bloodborne and Legend of Zelda. It has this really memorable moment that I'm gonna sort of spoil, but only words, where you walk up to a castle and you see this outweighed look of an old cathedral-looking castle where the water has been switched out with blood, and I fucking adore it. It is so thematic. It's just so good. Literally, there's no other word for it, right? And not only that, but the boss fights are, as I said, fantastic. There are multiple different weapons, albeit the different type of weapons is really where it's at, because the different weapons are usually just variations of each other. As an example, you can find a sword that deals in poison, bleed, and so on. However, there are also claws, there are scythes and great swords, and so on. Like, there are different types of weapons, and that's where the diversion in gameplay comes up. There isn't a whole lot more to say about it, other than the fact that the soundtrack is also a banger. If you don't know what Hunt the Night is, go and look up a trailer, and if it looks remotely interesting to you, play it. I also do believe that there is a free demo on Steam, but without being able to say it for sure, I think that it is definitely worth, looking up if you can. And if, there is a demo, play it, give it a try, see if it's something for you. I definitely do recommend it, especially if you do like the aforementioned Bloodborne or the old Legend of Zelda games, and you don't mind a game that can be punishing. It has to be mentioned though, Hunt the Night do have some issues, specifically in the fact that, as some Steam users have described, albeit I didn't have that issue myself, whenever they were walking to a new area, the game would stagger a little bit or outright freeze. There's also people saying that it feels like an early access game. That is partially because the controls can feel a little wonky. It has to be mentioned, but I just believe that it's transcending those problems through its visual style, the combat, and the fact that, at least in my personal experience, I didn't have too many issues, and I felt like the controls were fine, but I was playing on a PlayStation controller, so that might be it. Now, before we move forward to the next game, I do want to re-emphasize this by saying, for me, this is one of my most played games this year. It's not because, as I said, anything on this list is better than the other. They are all great games. They're all really, really good games, and I would hold them for some of the highest regard in their specific genres. However, these last two games I had to put in there. There will be no line that these are my favorite for this year. Again, I haven't finished Baldur's Gate 3, so I don't want to talk about that one yet. But Remnant II is up next. And Remnant II, in case you don't know, is Souls with guns. And while I love the original Remnant, Remnant 2 took it to a new level. It became an addiction for me. I spent 200 hours within the first month of release. I streamed it almost daily for a week. It is one of my favorite games at this point. Remnant 2 has an interesting world, being that within the Remnant universe, you can use these big red stones to travel to other universes that are highly likely, or well, it's sort of implied that they are within a matrix of sort that is all computer generated. And I think it's kind of too meta for me in that regard, but the worlds themselves have their own lore and history that you can learn about within the game. The best example of this is Yasha, where you can read tombs about this ancient god that the gods that these people who are living in this world worshipped. And I think it is pretty interesting, one of them being the Ravager, a boss you actually get to see and kill if you so desire within the game. And I think it is fantastic. Each of the worlds feel fully like they have their own history and their own design and idea behind them. The only thing I can say with Remnant 2 is that I really wish that the game wasn't as RNG heavy as it is. You see, in Remnant 2, one of the big things you'll do is reroll worlds. You can either reroll the main campaign or adventures. If you reroll the main campaign, it means that you're starting all over on the main campaign, but on the same character with the same weapons and all that stuff. You can think of it as New Game Plus, but without the increase in difficulty, unless you specifically select that yourself, putting it up on the difficulty, right? And the same thing can be said about the adventures. Adventures are, however, instead of the entire campaign, so you don't have to play through every single world to unlock it as an adventure. You only have to play through one here, and then you can just go over to adventure and play, that world. So if you, let's say, complete Yasha in campaign, you unlock it as an adventure mode, and then you can go through that campaign again, see all the different variations of both bosses, loot, and so on you get. Because you see, in Remnant, there are multiple bosses for each boss arena, or like where the boss arena was, as there are multiple stories being told in the different worlds. And I think that is a super interesting idea, really, being that you can play through the game. I had this experience where I was talking to my friend, right? He was also playing through the game, I was playing through the game, and he had a completely different boss within one of the areas that I just had never seen. And I think ideas like that and like having that mechanic is super interesting. However, there are two variations on most of the worlds, with a third being added with the DLC, the Awakened King, to one of them. However, where I will be complaining a little bit is not the RNG with bosses, but it's the RNG with amulets, random events, and so on. Because the RNG there can be horrendous. I am currently hunting down the last couple of world items that I need, and because, well, Remnant 2 is huge, there is over 200 rings in the game and no bad luck protection, so there's a lot of different places, they could be. And the thing is, they aren't guaranteed to be there. Sometimes I run up there, I see the purple glow of an item, I pick it up, and it's a ring that I already have, so it's just 250 scrap, the game's currency. There's also items that are specifically being bought from some vendors that have them purely through RNG, where there's a chance every 30 minutes or so that they have them. I don't quite like that too much because some of those items are fairly powerful and game changing, but it's not a huge issue and it's not a deal breaker. I will especially say that I think the weapons in Remnant 2 are awesome, and that counts both for both the DLC and the main game. One of my favorite examples is in the main game. You have a gun that shoots a poison cloud, but when you activate its mods, it sends out these seeking projectiles that can kill everything around you. It's really cool. It's just really, really cool. And another thing that I really do like is that the mutators or mods that you can equip to each weapon also change them visually. And that makes it super interesting to see how a gun looks if you put another mod on it and so on. And, there's just quite a bit to do in Remnant. I think Remnant is really interesting. It also has a system where if you do specific things or find specific items, you unlock new classes that gives you new ultimates and passives. And you can just freely swap between them. You don't need to grab another character up, nor do you need to level it up again. You can just level it up once and it's an item you can de-equip or equip. And once you've unlocked it, you can also start your next playthrough as that character, which is good because that means you're using in the game's hardcore mode. So another part of Remnant, and the reason why the entire thing with the characters is so good, is that in Remnant, you have different challenges you can complete to get different rewards. Most of them can be done on the same character, being actually everything but one. That one being the permadeath character, as permadeath is a setting that you have to enable within character creation. And once you've enabled it, if your character dies, he is gone from permadeath and the game itself. But if you complete it, you get quite a few rewards, some of them being pretty good rings for every world you complete. However, you also get a special gun that can be used on the normal character as well. And that exact same thing applies actually, because if you do it on the normal character, like let's say you make a normal character that isn't in permadeath and you complete the game on the highest difficulty, those weapons that you unlock on that difficulty, not being everything, the ones that are specifically rewarded to you for completing the game, are also unlocked on your new character. And like that, there are some interplay there, just like with the classes, where you can unlock everything basically on one character. It's super cool and a super unique system that I haven't seen being done a lot. The class system was done by Lords of the Fallen, but done worse. However, the rest really wasn't, and I think that's super interesting. I always like games where I can sort of interplay between different playthroughs, while still, I can progress my main character while playing an alt. It's always fun, and it's a nice little touch to the game. I think it's awesome. I think Remnant is definitely also worth a try, just like every other game on the list. And it's probably my favorite game of the year, being that I have spent more than 200 hours in it now. And that time is only taken up as I'm attempting to get all the items. I really just enjoy Remnant. I am not tired of it yet. I am high on that game. It is so good, and I highly recommend it. Up next, what is also contending for my favorite game of the year spot being Lies of P. Lies of P is hard. It is really, really hard. But Lies of P is also a beautiful game with a wonderful story that is told to you more directly than most Souls games, and game design that's only been done by FromSoft basically until now. Lies of P is a game that has made me feel a lot of different things while playing, but has stuck around in my mind basically since I finished it, and that is something that really does describe it as being a good game for me, when a game can really stand out so much that for me it is still memorable now. Lies of P is hard, as I said. It's a Souls-like where you play as Pinocchio, being that is what the P stands for, in a sort of steampunkian world after all the robots has turned evil. And it is smooth as heck. The feel of the game is just there on every level. The audio visual feedback is insane. Like the clank for parrying a weapon is just memorable still. And the boss fights themselves are masterpieces. Basically, all of them are good, in my opinion. There are some that are less good than others, but none of them are outright garbage. I wouldn't trade them in for something else. I think they all fit into the game very, very well, even if they all basically skill checked me pretty hard, especially the Duke. But god damn, was it a fun experience. Lies of P also has a absolute banger soundtrack. A soundtrack that I still listen to and is actually on my playlist. It is insanely good on every level. Not just because the game is as memorable as it is, or the story is so good as it is, but also because, well, the weapons. There is this very unique system in Lies of P where, yes, you can trade a weapon like the souls-ish items, the essence in, for a boss weapon, just like in Dark Souls. However, in Lies of P, there's another mechanic. With most weapons that are unique, so are boss weapons or something like them, you can actually take parts of them and combine them into other parts. That meaning that you can take the handle of a dagger and put it on a wrench. Now, there might be a penalty for doing that, a little damage penalty, but you can do it, and it changes the moveset of those weapons. Now, that is really fucking dope and a really cool mechanic. Personally, I would recommend sort of removing the entire thing with like the penalty that apparently is there. I don't know if they've done it since my review, but when I was playing the game, that was a thing. There's also the fact that at the time, dodging was locked behind, like double dodging right after each other was locked behind an upgrade, which is also kind of stupid. But really, it isn't that big of a deal because the game itself is just so good. Almost on every single level. It is, by and large, one of the best Souls-likes I've ever played, and a game that manages to stand besides FromSoft's work. Not as a game that jumps out of the genre, but a game that perfects the genre almost. It is incredible to play. The smoothness of the combat, the amount of builds you can make, how the entire world is together is just all good. And I can recommend it highly to anybody, really. Especially if you like games like Dark Souls, especially if you like Elden Ring, and if you like Lords of the Fallen, try playing an actual good game like Lies of P. It's just incredible good. And obviously, that was a joke. If you like Lords of the Fallen, you can like that game. I didn't hate it. I thought it was super good in some places, but not good in others. Like, it was very mid to me. But Lies of P wasn't. It is, by and large, one of the best games I've ever played, and I also recommend buying it or just playing it on Game Pass like I did. So, that is it. That is my best games this year. Now, I know there might be some people out there who are like, I wish Baldur's Gate were on here, and that's alright. This was my list. You can comment yours in the description, like your 5 favorite games if you want, so we can just like see what each other likes. And if you're wondering what Baldur's Gate, I will be talking about it later in 24, being, well, the current year. Also, Happy New Year's. I'm sorry for not uploading this early. I didn't have it done, and I ended up spending my New Year's with my parents and a friend of mine. So we ended up not really doing this instead. Sorry about that, but, you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. And yeah, I really have enjoyed all the support I've gotten throughout the last year. I thank you so much. It's incredible to me that I have 51 people sub to the channel. I never expected to get over 10. And here we are. I don't really know why anybody cares necessarily. I don't really get it, but thank you for caring. It means the world to me. I think you're all amazing. And thank you for being here with me. And if you're watching this far into the video where it's just me rambling here at the end, thank you for that as well. It means a lot that you're willing to hear me out. Thank you. You're wonderful. I hope you have a great 2024. I will be continuing to do what I've done. I have some fun ideas coming up. I'll be making a video on the original Dark Souls. And I will also be making one on Dark Souls 2, as surprise, surprise. I really liked it. And yeah, going into the next year, I have some other fun ideas. So it's just not like commentary about games that I like, but it's also something else. I have some bigger projects that I want to do. So we'll see how everything pans out. With school and everything, my life is busy. But I do love doing this, and I don't want to sacrifice that. So, as I said, it is what it is. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you have a great year. Happy New Year's. Sorry for the delay on this video again. I again hope you have a great year, and I'll see you all later. Bye.